Hey everybody, it's Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Sumosprings Helper Springs on our 2020 Ford F-53 chassis motorhome. So we got our customer here that we just got done working on their motorhome, putting all those suspension parts on, and we just wanted to take the time to ask him why he came to eTrailer and why he was specifically looking for those suspension parts. So are you having an issue with your motorhome or anything?
No, it's just if you go on all the diagnostic things you read about the Ford chassis, it doesn't matter if it's my brand or 5 other different brand RVs, but that's their weak point, and you have the parts to install and sell. Plus, I trust the jobs you guys do, and I can always go back and look at your YouTube video to see, oh yeah, this wire fell off one part. I know where it goes because I've seen you put it, and I know you torqued it or you used blue Loctite or red Loctite.
Right.
So I know it was done.
Yeah. Well, and after you have had a little bit of time to drive it after all those components are on, could you feel a difference? Did it improve
last
anything?
night on the way back on your roads here, I was a little bumpy on the freeways with
Yeah.
all the snow you get, and you could tell the suspension on the front end that I could feel it was a lot smoother.
Nice. Well, that's really good to hear. I'm glad that it's all working out. Do you have any questions or anything, any concerns about any of the parts that we put on?
This is a new vehicle, and the Ford recommends getting it realigned from after you've left the factory with it. So I noticed when we picked it up with 10 miles on it, the steering was 15 degrees off. It wasn't true center, so that means I have to get it realigned. And I was wondering, on that steering stabilizer, are those nuts torqued, or are they just aircraft nuts that hold that steering stabilizer?
On the tie rod itself?
Yeah.
They're torqued down, but it's a pretty low torque, so once they get it aligned...
Okay, I'll probably end up calling Bob, and touching base with you guys when I go to do it, but I guess the lights and the getting it aligned is the most two things on a brand new rig, because when they say, they never tell you that when you buy it, but after you get back and read the book on the Ford chassis, oh yeah, I got to do that.
Well, and that is the nice thing about all the parts you did get, though, is that down the road there's no maintenance, so that is a plus. You can just don't have to worry about that besides the factory maintenance you got to do. But all the parts, they're no maintenance in them, so you can just enjoy your motorhome, continue on with all your trips, and not have to worry about all those little things.
And we both, I'm 72 and she's 63. We do crawl underneath and move it ourselves, and we do look, that, oh wow, these nuts need to be tightened. So we always keep track of what's going on underneath. So.
Oh yeah, a little bit of preventative maintenance goes a really long way. But yeah, glad you guys came down. Glad we could definitely help you out, and I guess I'll give you your keys back and you can be on your way. So here at eTrailer, we get a lot of questions about motorhomes, especially the suspension. Because let's face it, it's a really large vehicle with a lot of area for wind to catch. So while we're driving down the road, if a truck passes by, we end up getting pushed around because the wind starts pushing the side of the motorhome. Not to mention if we take a turn or anything like that, it's a really soft, mushy feeling, almost like a boat. It starts leaning and we get a lot of body roll. Well, that's a little bit nerve-wracking for some people, so we end up having an extremely tight grip on the steering wheel. We're really stressed and we can't relax. Not to mention everybody in the back's getting tossed around, really not an enjoyable thing. Now the whole point of having a motorhome is so we can go around, visit places we haven't been before, and take some family and friends with us. So it'd be really nice to be able to feel more in control and relax while we're driving our motorhome. And that's where suspension enhancements are going to help. Suspension enhancements are going to alleviate a lot of those symptoms that we have, that body roll, and then being tired once we get where we're going, because we end up shifting around in our seat, trying to compensate for that, fighting the steering wheel, all of those problems. So suspension enhancements are definitely going to alleviate a lot of those problems. But let's go ahead and take our motorhome on our test course, and we can go through each one of those symptoms and see which component is going to help with that. So as I come up to the bumps course, I'm going to be going about 5 miles an hour just to have a nice baseline. But the bumps here are going to give us a good depiction, especially on the alternating bumps here, of that rocking or that side to side, kind of that mushy feeling. Because as we go over, one side's going to go up and we get that rocking feeling and really see how it's going to affect us while we're driving. And I can already tell it's definitely rocking a lot even after the bumps. It's continuing to go and kind of sway back and forth. As we come up to the solid speed bumps, that's going to give us a good depiction of going over potholes or ruts in the road and really be able to tell what kind of feeling we're going to get coming through the seat. As you can see, that's a pretty harsh bump. You can feel it resonating through the seat pretty good. It's not crazy, but you can definitely tell that they're there. It's a little bit uncomfortable. As I come up to the slalom course, I'm going to be going about 10 miles an hour. I'm just going in and out of the turns. And this is really going to show us that side-to-side action and that swing, or what I like to call that boat feeling, where we just feel like we're kind of floating around. And just even starting to come into the turns, you can definitely feel that swaying, kind of rocking feeling. Because before we actually start to turn, the motorhome starts to lean really bad. And genuinely just feels like I need to slow down a little bit. So after a long period of driving like this, I could definitely see how you would be exhausted from moving around so much, having to readjust, and again, having a really firm grip on that steering wheel. So here's what our SumoSprings are going to look like once we have them installed, and they're going to really help alleviate a lot of those problems, especially with the bumps and a little bit of the sway, because they're going to be attached directly to the frame and the leaf spring. Now they're going to be a one-piece design, so they're always going to have support back here and help carry that load that we have. Because a lot of times in our motorhome we have bathrooms in the back, the fuel tank, water tanks. There's a lot of weight back here. Not to mention, if we are flat towing a vehicle, that's even more weight added in the back. So having that support back here will definitely smooth out the ride and make it a lot easier to handle and drive our motorhome. Now we are going to have one SumoSpring on each side of our axle. The nice thing is they are going to work independently from each other, which is definitely going to help out with that swaying going on. It's going to cut down because as one side goes down, it's going to start to compress. The other side is going to want to stretch out, so it's naturally going to want to start fighting and coming back to that neutral state. So it's definitely gives us a lot more stability. We don't have to worry about that mushy, rolling body feeling that we get when we're driving. Now there's a lot of different suspension upgrades for motorhomes. Now I really like the SumoSprings because the fact that they're maintenance free. Once they're in, we don't have any kind of maintenance or any kind of procedures that we have to do. We don't have to monitor anything. Because like with airbags, they're a little bit more involved. We got to make sure we have the correct amount of air pressure in them, and the installation is going to be a lot more involved as well because we have to run lines, just more involved. These, we can put them in and just enjoy our motorhome. Now as you can see, this is going to be pretty close once we get our tire back in place, and I know a lot of customers get worried about the spring being too close to the tire, because obviously right now the axle's hanging, so it's stretched out, but as we put the weight back down, our spring is going to compress. But that's the nice thing about these SumoSprings. They compress vertically with very little lateral expansion, so you don't have to worry about it bulging out and potentially rubbing against the tire. Now our springs are going to have a 3,000 pound weight capacity at 50% compression. Now that's not going to add 3,000 pounds to your capacity of your motorhome. Again, it's just there to help absorb a lot of those road shocks and give us the support we need whether we're flat towing or just driving our motorhome. Now one thing I do recommend, if you're having a lot of problems with sway or just a really uncomfortable rough ride, the SumoSprings in the back will definitely help with the back end doing that, but they do make a set for the front as well. That way we can have full stability from the front all the way to the back. But now that we've seen what our SumoSprings look like and gone over some of the features, we're going to put our wheels and tires back in place, take our motorhome back onto the test course, and see how much of an improvement it made. So now again, we're going to come up to our bumps course, and again, I'm going about 5 miles an hour just so we can get a nice baseline to compare it to our first run. And honestly, after that first bump, I can already start to tell the difference. It's a little bit more controlled. Now, I feel like I can just relax a little bit. I can loosen up my grip on the steering wheel. And I mean, yeah, again, the bumps are there, but they're not as bad or as harsh on your back going through the seat, or really throwing the motorhome around as hard as we go over them. And now as we come up to our slalom course, we're going about 10 miles an hour, so you can really compare it to that first run again. And it definitely feels a lot more stable. Again, I can really relax a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it's not like driving a sports car, but the motorhome definitely feels a lot smaller than it did before, and it's just responding a lot easier. As I'm going in and out of the turns, it's reacting rather than leaning first and then turning. I do have to say I am very happy with the results. I would say I'm surprised, but I've put a lot of these on motorhomes, and they all seem to have pretty much the same result. They definitely help out with the stability. The vehicle seems smaller than it really is, so it's just easier to handle, easier to control, which means in the end result, we can relax, enjoy ourselves, and not be so stressed out and have such a death grip on the steering wheel. To begin our installation, we want to park our motorhome on a nice flat level surface. Now we are going to have to remove our rear wheels. I suggest using your leveling jacks to get the rear up just enough so that you can get the tires off the ground, and you only want to really remove one side at a time just for safety, and you do want to make sure you put jack stands underneath the frame to make sure everything's supported. Once you have your wheel off, we can get our spring assembly ready. Now you want to grab the spring out of your kit and the upper bracket. Now the upper bracket is going to have two holes on the large flat section. They're going to line up with two of the holes in your spring. So we'll just place our spring, or the bracket, right over the spring. I'm going to grab two 3/8 flange nuts, bolts, and we're going to screw the bolts right through the bracket into the spring. I'm going to grab a 9/16 socket and tighten them up. Now we want to grab our lower bracket. Now you're going to notice that it's got a little hook on there, and we have a large opening on the other side. We want that large opening to go towards the front, and on our upper bracket, that lip needs to be pointing towards the tire. So if this is going towards the front and that's going towards the outside, it should be bolted on just like this. So you can turn our spring and bracket on the side, pass our bolt through that bottom hole, and thread it right into the spring. Now this one, I will say we're going to leave a little bit loose just so we can still turn the bracket, because we want to make sure we get everything lined up correctly, so we don't want to crank on this just yet. You still want a little bit of movement in that bracket. Now we're going to be sitting our spring assembly right on top of our leaf spring pack. Now you're going to have two U-bolts. That hook that's on the bottom bracket needs to hook on to the forward U-bolts right around the back here. So we'll take our spring assembly. And again, we have to move some lines out of the way, and actually before we get ours in place, we have all of these lines right here, so we are going to have to remove the clamp that's holding them in place, and then we can set our spring assembly down. So now that we got that clamp loose, I'm just going to place our spring assembly so that large opening is going around our leaf springs, and again that hook is grabbing the forward U-bolt on the inside there. Now if you look on that lower bracket, we're going to have a square hole on either side of the leaf spring. We're going to grab our carriage bolts out of our kit, and you may run into it where it's just a little bit tight right there. Typically you can just kind of push it past the spring, but you want that bolt to go all the way down through, and we'll do that for both sides. And then on the bottom where it's coming through, we're going to grab our saddle clamp. Now this is going to be kind of a U or an N type shape. We want the flat section to go up against the leaf spring, and it does have a little notch here. That's going to go towards the outside so it can clear our brake assembly and the caliper bolts. So we're going to slide this up underneath so our bolts come out through those holes. And then we want to secure that bracket down using a couple 3/8 flange bolts. For now, we just want to loosely get them in place just so that bracket won't fall off. Then we'll come back with a 9/16 socket, and we're going to tighten up both of those flange nuts. You do want to alternate a little bit just so that when you are tightening it, it goes up evenly and doesn't get in a bind. Now, since our suspension is actually hanging down now, it's not at the normal ride height. So we need to take a few measurements so we can see where we need to mount our upper brackets. So we'll take a tape measure. We're going to measure right from the top of the frame. And I'm going to measure down. I'm going to make a mark right about 4.5 inches. Now we want to do that on both sides of our bracket. So we'll come to the other side and we're going to mark right about 4.5 right next to the bracket on the frame. Now that's going to be our reference point. We want to lift our bracket up to where we can get it lined up with the bottom hole. It gets as close as we can to that mark. Now one thing you do want to keep in mind is the lines that we had to move. We can still move them out of the way, but as we lift it, we really want to watch this bracket and make sure it's not going to crush these wires. Now the easiest way to get our axle and brackets up high enough is if we take a floor jack and we put it right underneath the hub. That way when we start lifting it up, it'll lift up the entire axle. That's another reason why I suggest doing one side at a time, because we have the leverage from the other side of the tire making contact whenever we start to lift it. Again, you just want to watch those lines. Make sure they're not going to get damaged as you're lifting the axle. So now that we have our bracket lined up, again, you kind of want to double check those lines, make sure there's at least a little bit of movement in there so they're not being squished. But we want to drill out the hole that's lined up with that mark and the one above it on both sides. Now, it's not a bad idea to double check behind the frame, make sure there's no lines or anything that possibly could get damaged before you drill. But I'm going to start with a really small drill bit just to get a pilot hole going. I'm going to do that for all 4 locations and then come back and drill it out to the final size, which would be just over a 3/8. Now that all the holes are drilled, we want to grab the black 3/8 flange bolts out of our kit. We're going to pass them through the bracket all the way through the frame, all 4 locations. Then on the back side, we want to secure it down with a 3/8 flange nut. Now typically, you can reach behind the frame, but keep in mind, we did just get done drilling, so there's probably quite a bit of metal shavings around. So you do want to be mindful of where you're going and watch out for all of that. But you should be able to reach behind it, at least get the nut started on there, get a few turns, then we can come back and tighten them all up. So now I want to come back with the 9/16 socket and wrench. And really it's going to depend on how you can get in there. We just want to tighten it up, but you can hold the bolt with your wrench or you can hold the nut with your wrench, whatever's easiest for you to get access. And then we'll just tighten everything up. And we'll repeat that for all the remaining bolts. Now you don't want to forget to tighten up that bottom bolt at the bottom of the spring. So you can take a shallow 9/16 socket, wrench, or a ratcheting wrench. You just want to make sure that that bolt is nice and snug. And now that this side's on, we can put our wheel and tire back in place, move to the other side, and repeat that entire process. So it may be a little bit difficult to see the improvement that our suspension upgrades made because it is going to be about ride quality. Now the ride quality is a little bit subjective because it's about how you feel while you're driving. I can honestly say I feel like it did make an improvement. I felt more in control and I could relax a little bit. So if you're having a lot of those symptoms of either body roll, a bumpy ride, or just an uncomfortable ride in general, suspension upgrades are definitely going to make it easier for you to drive your motorhome and more enjoyable. But again, with all that being said, I'm Rob here at etrailer.com, and that'll finish up your look at the SumoSprings Helper Springs on our 2020 Ford F-53 chassis motorhome.